All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to give our attendees just a moment to join before we begin the panel.
Kareemah, is this being recorded?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's good. That's a good idea.
And I can access it if you would like it after this.
Okay.
We'll wait about one more minute before we get started. Okay, before we get started, if everyone just will make sure that they are muted. Thank you very much. My name is Kareemah Lewis, and I am the GAWL VP of Public Affairs, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event. This event is the first in our inaugural Path to Empowerment series. This series was created by myself, attorney Aaron Gertensang, and attorney Jakima Basco. And it was inspired by our current GAWL president, Judge Veronica Cope, who has fostered many endeavors to develop and to empower women lawyers, and of course, women in general. But we hope that this series will create the space necessary for women lawyers to unify efforts, to reevaluate the use and effectiveness of our platforms, and to discuss issues for the betterment of ourselves, our profession, and our community. And tonight's event is titled A Call to Action, Women Lawyers' Social and Political Engagement in Georgia, and will take a specific focus on the organizational histories and organizational involvement in the development of women lawyers. And we have the grand opportunity to have female pioneers in this field on a panel that will answer questions and then engage in a brief Q&A after a panel discussion. But before we get started, I want to turn the reins over to our current GAWL president, Judge Veronica Cope, for our presidential address.
Good evening, everyone. I am Judge Veronica Cope, and I have the pleasure of serving as the statewide president of GAWL this year. For years, since the start of the 20th century, women lawyers have been at the forefront of every turning point in our country. Women lawyers have led the way. Our theme for this year is women empowering, supporting, uplifting, and encouraging other women. Our former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, once said, and I quote, "There is a special place in hell for women who don't support or help other women," end quote. And I'll just have a little spin off of that. And I'll say there is a not so special place for women lawyers who don't help other women lawyers. Our mission at GAWL is to enhance the welfare and development of women lawyers and to support their interests. I believe that our nation is at a turning point. It is at a crossroad. And just as in times past, it is women lawyers who will lead the charge in this turning point in this important time in our nation. Our health, our lives, and our very democracy are at risk. And so it will be women lawyers like the pioneers who are on this panel, like those new lawyers and newer lawyers that are watching today and participating in this event that will lead the charge as we move forward. Each of the organizations that is a part of this panel has, as a part of its goal, as a part of its mission, to develop women lawyers. And I believe that we can continue to, as we
See, we might have some technical difficulties. Give this just a couple more seconds. Okay. We will, as soon as her connection resolves, we will come back to our presidential address. But I do want to get started with our panelists' introductions. And I'll start first with Justice Leah Ward Sears, who is a partner in the litigation section at Smith, Gambrill, and Russell LLP. Justice Sears is a former Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court. At just 36 years old, Justice Sears became the first woman and youngest justice appointed to the Supreme Court of Georgia. She's also the first African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice of any state Supreme Court in the United States. She has served as a Fulton County Superior Court judge and was the first African-American woman to serve as a Superior Court judge in Georgia. And she is one of 3 founders of the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys and served as its first president. And I could go on and on and on, of course, as to the accolades and involvements of Justice Sears. But for this particular event, when asked about organizational involvement, we are specifically, and not exclusively, but we're specifically going to focus on Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys for Justice Sears. Okay, next slide, please. Our next panelist is Dorothy Beasley. She is a senior judge of the Court of Appeals, a mediator and arbitrator at Henning Mediation and Arbitration Service Incorporated. She was appointed to the Georgia State Court of Fulton County in 1977. She was the first woman appointed and then elected as judge to the State Court of Fulton County. She's the first woman to be appointed to the Georgia Court of Appeals in 1984. And she's also responsible for the court's change in motto, which will pop up here in a second. Her bar involvement includes, oh, there it is. And as you can see, it now includes the rights of free men and women. Her bar involvement includes the ABA, the State Bar of Georgia, and the Lawyers Club of Atlanta. But for purposes of this event, her experience will speak from her involvement with the Georgia Association of Women Lawyers. She served as the past president and has been a longtime member and supporter of that organization. And our next panelist is Judge Veronica Cope, who was recently sworn in as the Gwinnett's newest state court judge. She is a former civil litigator and criminal defense attorney with close to 2 decades of experience. Of course, her involvement spans a number of bar-related organizations. She is a member of the Gwinnett County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a member of GAWL. She is a past president of the Gwinnett Chapter of GAWL, past president of the GAWL Foundation, and current president of GAWL. And of course, her experience will reflect her involvement in all of those organizations. Next, we are excited to have attorney Bonnie Youn. She is a senior legal recruiter with the RMN agency, recognized as Atlanta's top legal recruiting firm for the past 4 years in a row. She has been locally and nationally recognized as a community leader. She was selected in 2013 as the White House Cesar Chavez Community Champion of Change for her work in immigration reform. She was honored by the Georgia Asian Times as one of the most influential Asian Americans in Georgia, and has served as past president and is a longtime board supporter and board member of the Georgia Asian Pacific American Bar Association, GAPABA. And I just wanted to point out, actually led the teams that organized the 2012 and 2013 GAPABA and Pacific Islander Legislative Day. Excited to have you, Bonnie. And our last but not least panelist is attorney Bernadette Olmos, who is the founding attorney, mediator, and arbitrator at AB Olmos and Associates PC, which is a full spectrum family law and personal injury firm. She was recognized by the Georgia Trend magazine in its Georgia's Legal Elite publication. She was appointed to the State Bar of Georgia's Committee on Children in the Courts. And she's a member of the Family Law section of the State Bar of Georgia Diversity Committee, serves on the board of Georgia Legal Services Program, and is a board member and longtime supporter of the Georgia Hispanic Bar Association. For the purposes of this event, we'll focus on her involvement in GHBA when we get to that. And those are our panelists for today. We are now going to get started with our discussion. And our first question, I'm going to start with Justice Leah Ward Sears and proceed down the panel. What is your understanding as to why GAWL was started? What was missing in the legal community for the members of GAWL, and how did GAWL meet those needs? And there we are.
There we go.
Yes.
So you have to stop. Just with this Zoom, I have to remember to unmute all the time. What was missing was women. You know, I started practicing law in 1980 at a firm by the name of Alston, Miller and Gaines. It subsequently morphed into Alston and Bird. It was a huge law firm at the time with about 95 lawyers. That was considered like huge in the city. It rivaled King and Spalding, which maybe had like 120 lawyers or something like that. That's just how the law firms were. There were 3 African Americans in the law firm, okay, and there were 4 women there. So, it was not a comfortable experience, you know, at the time. I mean, putting it kind of bluntly, it was okay to make jokes about people of color and funny little women jokes and all that kind of stuff. It was a very, very different time, and what was acceptable then, very, very acceptable, was just simply not acceptable now. And personally, I felt very alone and very isolated, but very committed to make it at a firm like that, because it was a tremendous opportunity. Most of the women lawyers were, of which there were very few all over town, didn't get an opportunity to go to sort of what it was not big law back then, but I guess that was big law, you know. So, you know, it was I reached out to the few other Black women for GAWL that I could find, Barbara Harris and Benzonetta Tipton Lane, neither of which were in large law firms. The next year, Gail Joyner Tucson came along. She was at Kilpatrick, and there was a Black woman at Troutman Sanders, Amanda Seward, and that made, you know, it just kept growing and growing. But it was mainly just for people who looked like me, had the same concerns that I had, to kind of be close to. somebody I could talk to, somebody who really understood what was going on in my life. It's kind of difficult spending your whole day with all white men, and that was it. So, and then coming home, and then you're a lawyer, and women lawyers were rare and all that. The other thing is, and the GAWL has morphed into something very different now. Uh, but at the time, we wanted to be politically very active. We wanted to see uh, more women lawyers, more women in the legislature, more Black women specifically. And so, I mean, if you read the original bylaws, which were written in my uh, uh, living room in my house. We were like eating lunch and eating sandwiches and all just like lying around on the floor. That's how few of us there were really were. It was really a not great time. It was a great time in terms of there were few of us. And so we were all very, very close. It was a terrible time because there were few of us and not enough of us, if you get my drift. But the idea was to become a pretty very, very political organization. We didn't think Gate City was cutting the mustard, to be perfectly honest. We thought it was male dominated. Very few women, Black women could do anything other than sort of like stuff envelopes or be secretaries. And in that organization, it was sexist too. And we didn't like that. And then it was very too polite, polite. And, let's try to polite our way to get racism over. I mean, so GAWL was kind of founded as a much more radical. I mean, not radical like we saw at the Capitol last week, but bold, to be bold and to really make change and to look people in the eye and to demand things and to require things. And, we're not going to take less because we aren't less kind of type thing. And then also to do things like go to each other's baby showers and, hug on one another. And if somebody had a problem at their big law firm, they could come running over to my big law firm and I'd give them a big hug. So that's really, to my mind, what it started as. And it's different now.
Thank you, Justice Sears.
Okay.
Move to Judge Beasley and ask the same question, but about GAWL.
You're on mute.
And Kareemah, if you don't mind.
Mute. Can't mute. Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Well, I go back to membership in GAWL to 1968. And what Justice Sears says about what was in the 1980s, take that back
Yeah.
to 1968. And GAWL was very instrumental in my getting my first job because I came here in late December of 1967 as a bride, not knowing anything about Georgia. I was coming from Washington. And the first thing that happened was that I went to a Christmas party with my husband, and Owen Forrester was there, and he said, "You need to come and talk to Margie Pitts-Hames." So I did right away. And she said, number one, join GAWL. Really, she did. And the second thing is, don't call any of the big law firms. They won't even talk to you unless you want to be a secretary. All the larger law firms, you're going to have to find something else to do. And I thought, oh, brother, this is not going to be easy. And things were much more open for women in Washington than they were in Georgia. So I was very, very fortunate because about a week and a half later, she called me. She was a partner at Fisher & Phillips. And she called me and she said, "We will offer you a job." So I was on my way with that. And it's been, that's why I stay a member of GAWL, because I know how much it has meant to me. And at that time, I didn't help start it. It was already in existence, but I don't know why it started exactly. but certainly we existed, and it was just a few people. It was maybe 12 or 15 or something like that. And I don't know that it was even spread much around the state, although we did have people that, because we would like meet for lunch, that's all, and have some activities. But it was done, I think, for encouraging one another, helping find jobs too, talking about our problems as women, trying to find out how to get around them, I would say, and also fighting discrimination and encouraging everybody or each other in that way, because we were discriminated against in everything, in our jobs, and we couldn't get a word in edgewise in the state bar meetings at all. We were not welcome at the state meetings in June, and they were always held in Savannah. It was the good old boys for sure, and certainly white. So it was, and I would go down there with Romay Powell, those meetings, and she would go to the juvenile court things and I would go to the other things, and then we'd get together at night. We shared a room, and we would collaborate then on what we had learned and see what we could do about it. But so the women really stuck together because we needed to, if you didn't want to be totally isolated. And I think that was one of the big things that they did to keep it going, was just getting together. So in these years, I have seen it grow tremendously, of course, to what it is now. And I remember when we started chapters around the state, which I hope are still going. I don't know how many there are. Are there,
Yes.
Kareemah?
Yes, they are still thriving. Yes.
Good. Because it was taken gradually. So it's this whole business of women moving ahead in the whole society that we're a part of. And our profession, being lawyers, is one of the, like medicine and so forth, that stand out as having pushed. And so we're pushing, I think, and leading women that are not. Women in business now is certainly growing a lot. There's more heads of businesses that are women, and entrepreneurs, doctors, and people in Congress. We need more, of course, but I think we're on a big change now. And remember that women's thing that was in Beijing, what, 15 or 20 years ago now, that Veronica Biggins was there for us, not for lawyers, but for the United States. I think we're seeing enormous change. And so I'm delighted with this event, because I think that if we all pull together, we can help this go much faster and much more broad than it is now, and get us to be spokespersons and encourage young women to run for office, whether it's a board of education, which definitely is needed, women somehow or other. We, I don't have any children, but most do. And so board of education is good, legislature, anything, city council is anything that you're interested in, and starting locally and working your way up. And I think that's another thing we need to do, is support women who are running for public office. If they're qualified. We cannot support them if they're not. And just because they're a woman doesn't mean that we're going to support them. But I think we need to do much more of that together, all of our groups. So maybe I'm going far afield now, but
No, you're fine. And that was one of
well, let me just mention a couple of you asked for notable members. None of you are going to know these people, but Geneva Garner was the executive secretary to Mr. Rich of Riches. And well, she was a lawyer. We had the twins, Ruby and Ruth Crawford. I don't know if you know anything about them, but they were well known all throughout the community. They were in everything. We had, let's see, Dorothy Robinson. Of course, she didn't go back that far. Well, she did. I guess she did go back that far. And she and I got to be close as state court judges. Freda Scobie, she was working as a law assistant up at the Court of Appeals. Margaret Dimeling. But Geneva was a very great contributor, because she was the historian, and she collected everything, articles, and histories. And so I wish we had all of that. We don't, but we do have some things, and I've given them all to the historian, the things that I had.
Thank you, Judge Beasley. And I know that was one of the things that we talked about. And I think that sometimes we as women lawyers underestimate the power of our platform. We are very powerful women. We are not regular. We are female lawyers. Few of us in this nation can say that. And that if we all combined efforts, we just could only imagine the number of things we could accomplish as
Sure,
such.
because we're trained to be advocates, so we're the ones that can speak out, know how to do that.
Right.
Correct. So thank you for highlighting that. I'm going to turn it over to our Judge Veronica Cope and allow you to finish any of the remarks that weren't resolved before the internet cut you. The internet got you. And then ask you to answer this question. What is your understanding as to why any of the organizations that you're involved in, because you're involved in all of these actually that are featured on our panel, was started? What was missing in the legal community for the members of those organizations, and how did the organization meet those needs?
Thank you, and hopefully my connection is better and it won't cut me off this time. But I just wanted to, I'm not sure exactly where I left off, but I just wanted to talk to the fact that each of the organizations that's represented here today has as a part of its goal to train and develop women lawyers. And I mean, we have represented here today thousands of women lawyers. There are over 40,000 women lawyers in Georgia. And just think about the collaborative effort that we could put forth in terms of, Judge Beasley talked about, being members of the legislature. I think there are approximately 80 members, just under 80 members, women members or female members of our state legislature. And my understanding is there's less than 10% of them are women. So less than 10% of the lawmakers in our state are women lawyers, women lawyers. And so as we develop our lawyers, we need to look to, as Judge Beasley said, running for office in every aspect of our communities. And so that's really why I have as my theme this year, women empowering, supporting, encouraging, developing other women. And I don't know if I got to this point, but I definitely wanted to share, the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who said, and I apologize if I said this before, but I quote, "There is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." And that's a quote. And I'll just say there's a not so special place for women lawyers who don't help other women lawyers. I think that wherever we are in our careers, we didn't get there alone. There's someone who helped us along the way. I spoke earlier about our pioneers, Judge Beasley, who was the first woman on the Court of Appeals, and also Justice Sears, who has shattered so many glass ceilings at the Superior Court level, as the first woman justice of our Supreme Court. And so, and even then, there were women who helped them along the way, and men too, I'm sure. But each of us have had those who have stepped in and helped us along the way. GAWL started back in 1928, and one of our founders, Minnie Hale Daniels, was actually the first female to earn a law degree in Georgia back in 1911. And so as she fought for admission for herself and others, I think there were about 16 others who also were admitted at the same time. But as she fought for those women to even be a member of the bar at that time, there birthed GAWL some 17 years later. At that time, there was the Atlanta Bar Association that has its origins back in the late 1880s. And of course, when women did become lawyers in Georgia, they were not allowed to be a part of that organization until years later. And so much like many of the other organizations represented here were started, there was not a representation. There was a need for that specific organization. And so over the years, we, as Justice Sears said, we have seen the organization morph and grow to meet the needs of women lawyers and the needs of the community. But I think if we look at the commonality, that is enhancing the development of our women lawyers. And so I know that we can do that even more so as a collective than as one organization.
Thank you so much, Judge Cope. I'm going to move to Attorney Youn and ask you the same question.
Well, just building upon what Judge Cope said, none of the women on this panel are going to hell because they have helped us all. And to illustrate that, I have a handy dandy little slideshow to show how everybody on this panel has actually helped the Georgia Asian Pacific American Bar Association on its journey. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share a little bit of a little blast from the past. So back in 2002, this is Judge Beasley. GAPABA, the Georgia Asian Pacific American Bar Association, was actually founded in 1993. And two of the co-founders are Judge Alvin T. Wong. If you know Asian American attorneys and jurists in Georgia, you've got to know Judge Alvin T. Wong. But in 2002, GAPABA was large enough. I think we had maybe 50 attorneys who regularly came to host the 2002 National Asian Pacific American Bar Association Convention. And guess who I found in the archives while I was cleaning my office during these COVID days, but Judge Beasley. And here she is with Larry Ellison and former NAPABA President Paul Chan. And then in 2014, when GAPABA hosted its first ever inaugural gala, who did we ask to be the keynote speaker but Justice Leah Sears? So Justice Sears, you were there, you know, from our historic days of, you know, setting precedent. You were groundbreaking and we asked you to be our first keynote speaker. I think we only had less than 100 people who came to that gala back in 2014. And Judge Veronica Cope, you yourself, I think the first time I met you was at the Lunar New Year banquet that was held in 2018. And I think you were running for state court judge at the time. And then here in 2019, the Public Service Committee of GAPABA hosted a reception for all Asian American elected and appointed officials. And of course, you came out to support us. And that's when I realized we were selfie queen kindred spirits, right? So I know there are a ton of selfies of us on Facebook together. And who else did we see? But GAPABA decided to start having collaborative, even just social events. And we hosted a joint happy hour together with the Georgia Hispanic Bar Association. And who do we see here but Bernadette Olmos enjoying with GAPABA at Chamagaucha in Buckhead. And this was very successful, very, very successful. And then this was the first time I met Kareemah Lewis, actually. And that was because our co-chair of the GAPABA Women's Leadership Committee, Casey Chow, I believe is on the board of the GAWL Foundation. And she invited members of GAPABA to come out to volunteer for the Atlanta Children's Shelter GAWL event that you were doing. And we made cookies. I don't think we were particularly good at making cookies, but that wasn't the point, right? So just as the history of the Women's Leadership Network within GAPABA itself, It's very recent. It was started in 2017. So GAPABA was founded in 1993. So you can see the progression from 1993 to 2017, where within GAPABA it was realized we needed to create a space for women, specifically to discuss issues. And our very first event with 23 attendees was a tea talk with the former dean of UGA. And then we decided to follow that up with a banquet specifically for the Women's Leadership Network. And then on the Court of Appeals, Judge Carla Wong McMillan, now on the Georgia Supreme Court as our first Asian American on the Georgia Supreme Court, was hosting. And we had 73 people. And I will say, to the credit of the men within our organization, and you can see here Judge Alvin T. Wong, of course, but also Michael Wu, who's on our board. Michael Wu is general counsel now of the company Madewell, very well known for its women's apparel. But back then he was general counsel of Carter's, and he was instrumental in making sure we had some really important speakers gathered together for our banquet events. The next year, we increased by another 10, 15 attendees, and we had Jean Lee, who's the executive director of the Minority Corporate Counsel Association, Ann Lee Benedict, who's general counsel of Summit Materials. Just an amazing gathering, and it shows the growth and the recognition within GAPABA of the importance of having a space for women to talk about our own issues. And in 2019 at the Wimbish House, we jumped up to 100 people. And then this year, during COVID, no less, we partnered with the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association with some really stellar panelists. Marie O. Huber, who's the general counsel of eBay, Jesse Liu, former U.S. Attorney, District of Columbia, Amy Chua, Tiger Mom fame, Judge Naomi Rao with the U.S. Court of Appeals District Circuit, Judge Lorna Schofield, U.S. District Court, Southern District of New York. We had 500 attendees. So the exponential growth that GAPABA has experienced also within our ranks, you know, we were lucky back in 2014 to have 100 people come to the gala, and now we regularly have 500 people, and that sells out the Georgia Aquarium. And that speaks to, I think, leveraging a lot of communications, a lot of technology, and, you know, a board that is absolutely dedicated to raising the profile of, you know, Asian American attorneys. I had one more really interesting photo from when we were founded in 1993, and let's see if I can pull it up. So this is Judge Alvin Wong and Professor Natsu Saito. This is an article in the AJC when they decided to start GAPABA with 13 members. And the story bears repeating. Both Judge Wong and Professor Saito, they combed the published Georgia bar directory for Asian sounding names, which in the South, you know, the last name Lee is actually quite deceptive, right? So they managed to find 13 Asian attorneys who were willing to sign on to start our bar association. And I think since then, I mean, the profile of Asian American attorneys in Georgia has definitely risen. Certainly having, you know, U.S. Attorney, now former U.S. Attorney B.J. Pak, Justice Carla Wong McMillan, you know, has raised the awareness within the legal industry. And we're very careful with our branding. But during COVID, you know, the attacks on Asian Americans, the rise of rhetoric like the Kung flu or the China virus has definitely impacted Asian American communities in very negative ways. Restaurants on Beaufort Highway being targeted or avoided because of the perception of being infectious. And I think we are also reckoning with our relationships with other other racial minorities. I remember before when the Rodney King riots happened in LA, and Koreatown being devastated in the wake of that, there was a lot of tension within the Korean American and Black communities. This time during the Black Lives Matters protests this summer, it was the very first time I'd seen the Korean community, like the immigrant Korean community, come out, do things like pass out water bottles. They printed out protest signs that said, "I can't breathe." And I walked in a protest in Duluth. So I'm starting to see over the years, when I moved here in 1994, where the conversation used to be very binary between Black, white, it's definitely inclusive. And Bernadette, I'm sure you'll attest now, of the Latino, Hispanic, and Asian American communities and how we can contribute to the growth of Georgia, the growing diversity here in our state.
Thank you, Bonnie. Absolutely inspirational. And that segues to you, Bernadette. The same question, but as it pertains to the Georgia Hispanic Bar Association.
Near and dear to my heart. The Hispanic Bar Association was already in existence when I became a student here, and Justice Sears does not understand how inspirational she is. She would come to John Marshall. I was a nighttime student, and she would come there. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know if at the time they were trying to get ABA accreditation. I don't know, but she was a big name in a little figure. She's really petite. So, and I said, wow, I'm in the right place now. Having moved from Texas to here, I was so excited. The home of Martin Luther King. I just was met with disappointment. And so when I saw at the school this petite little figure with the big, huge, presence, I thought, oh my goodness, someone that can identify at the very least. I knew I wasn't in Texas anymore, where there are Latinas on the Supreme Court, and many more mentors for me. But I thought, geez, here's another woman. She's a woman of color, someone that I can really look up to. And at that point, I hadn't heard much about the Hispanic Bar. They were active. I moved here in the late 90s, and I think they had just started to become really active. And Judge Wong must have been very busy in the 90s, because from what I understand, he was very instrumental in helping organize as well within the Hispanic lawyers. So there were so few of us around coming through the ranks, and even fewer women. And I remember in law school, there were only 2 Latinas in law school, and we stuck together. And we're thick as, what's the saying, thick as thieves, or whatever the saying is. We were always together, because I knew if anyone I could have a camaraderie with, who would understand me, who would get me, would be my one classmate. And over the years, I made friends with much of the membership of the Hispanic Bar. And again, now over the years, it's been 20 years at least since I've been I don't know if I've been a consistent member, but now in the last at least 10, I've been a consistent member. Now I'm a board member there. But we have seen the numbers in women lawyers growing. We don't have a program like GAWL, but we do have something like the Tea Talks, where it's a forum where we can learn from each other, mentor. It's our platform where we can get together and talk about issues, very raw conversations about work-life balance and how to deal with the gender difference at the office, and how to take your seat at the table. And these are conversations that actually happen when we have it's called cafecito. And so that's what we use our time. Now, that's not to say that we're not striving to get to a point where GAWL is and have some of that, but we're definitely on board of getting there, and we're working on the programming. And I completely agree with the rest of my panelists who are in favor of supporting females or women when we're running for office, and having that voice. And in terms of, and this, I'll just share this very brief story. when I was in law school, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, my dad back home in Texas was very good friends with a judge down there, and he told me something that still I remember to this day, and I impart with whenever I have new associates and especially females. Um, he told me, he said, "I'm on the bench," he said, "and I can call out the people who've been there a long time and tell them, just what I think it is." He said, "But you're in a different situation." Now, mind you, this was in the late 90s. And I'm looking at him again, bright eyed and bushy tailed, because I was in law school and I knew everything. And, I was a woman lawyer and I was going to eat up the world. And he said, "You, my dear," he was like, "you have it different." And I'm looking at him like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "No." He said, "When you walk into court, you better be prepared." And I'm looking at him like, "Of course." What? He was like, "No, because you have two things against you. You're Hispanic and you're a woman." And when he told me that, I looked at him and I was like, he's been at it, he's just way, because I knew it all. And then when I got out and started practicing over here, I realized what he was talking about. Because when I walked into the courtroom in 2006, I was asked if I was the interpreter, if I was the court reporter, if I was related to my client. And at one point, and I still see this deputy in the courtroom, and he looked, and we kind of chuckle about it now, but the first time I was asked how I'm related to my client, the look on my face must have been, "I'm going to come across the table and strangle you." And over the years, I've had these experiences that I've learned to kind of let them underestimate me, if you will, because it shows how ignorant people can be. And again, when I come from a place where there's Latinas on the Supreme Court of the state, and I'm in a place where they've never seen someone who looks like me in the courtroom, it's a new experience. And I had to take that step back and let them. So when I see new Latina lawyers coming through the ranks, I try to share that experience and say, just let them underestimate you. Just let them, because at some point, you will be able to show who you are. And that he's now deceased. And the judge who told me that, his words just keep coming back to me every time I have one of those experiences. As late as this morning, when you're sitting across the table, we were in mediation, and the gentleman on my opposing counsel asked, "So what's your background?" And I'm like, I'm sorry, what context? What are you asking me? You asking me how many years I've been in practice, if I've practiced other areas? No, he wanted to know why I speak Spanish, where I learned it, if I'm a native speaker. And so to me, I just kind of rolled it off and answered his question and moved on, because I knew that if I told him and made an ordeal about it, we would lose focus of why we were there. I've had it, and I think Kareemah used to work with me years ago, and she remembers some of these things, and she remembers the power struggles that we would see between a U.S. citizen parent versus an immigrant parent, and we see that all the time. And I'm talking, it's not only just the immigrants; they could be professionals from other countries that come here to practice, and we see that. Lawyers who come from other countries, and all of a sudden they have to go to school here for whatever reason, but yet they're not as astute, they're not as studied, they're not as smart. So you still have these stereotypes and assumptions about people that are being made. And so that's kind of where we are. And I always try to take younger, like I said, younger lawyers who've never had those experiences, and open their eyes to what they can be facing when they're in the practicing world.
Thank you, Bernadette. And I want to highlight one effort you didn't touch on. Working with you was actually my first job as a lawyer. And I give Bernadette all the credit for everything I know as a litigator, because I learned a lot there. But our clients were having issues getting interpreter services in the courts. And a lot of judges were saying that wasn't a right that they had. If we didn't bring our interpreter, they didn't have to interpret our grant us that courtesy. And Bernadette, I saw her create a CLE on this issue. And not only that, she created bench briefs and other training materials for judges. And that was actually a training that was incorporated for judges across our state. And the GHPA got behind the issue as well, and it just became so well publicized. And the issue, I haven't, I deem it to be moot because I haven't heard it as much as I did when I practiced in that time frame. But that organization, when they get behind an issue, they will make it happen. And she is one of the key figures behind that. So thank you for that explanation. And we probably have time for one more question. So I'm going to skip to what I think our attendees want to hear about the most. Looking ahead, how can these organizations that we've talked about use their platforms to be most useful in the future? Is there a benefit to thinking about how other organizations, such as the ones we've mentioned, can work together to enhance the support and community that we provide to our members? Is there strength in numbers? And do we do that enough? And I'll start, we'll go in the same order, just to Sears. I'll defer to you first.
No, I think we don't do that enough. But we do have to find areas where we can be in alignment. Because, not everybody, for instance, not all African Americans think the same, and the older I'm getting, the more I see this. People are complicated and people don't, necessarily see the things the same, and each organization. I think, Bonnie, you touched upon this when you were talking about the Korean reaction to George Floyd and the current situation to back in the day with, I forgot.
The Rodney King riots.
Yeah, exactly. So, you can't make assumptions just because we're all minorities that we all have the same goal, because that is just not true. And just among African Americans, there are some that are way more conservative and some not so much, and other groups too. But yes, to the extent where we can find things that we can align up with, there will be strength in numbers, but we have to be careful because, just because somebody is a minority doesn't necessarily equal that they think the same way perhaps all of us might. So yes, I'd like to see more of that.
Thank you, Justice Sears.
Okay.
Judge Beasley?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I have two things I want to say, and one of them has two parts to it, you might say. But let me start with this, because a friend gave me for Christmas a wonderful little book about friends. And let's see if I can find the one I want here real quick. Because there is strength in numbers. There's no doubt about that. We can unify. We've got a louder voice for advocacy. But there's only one thing worse than fighting with allies, and that's fighting without them. Winston Churchill said that. And I thought, that's great.
Yeah.
Get with it. So two things. One, I'd love to see us have an annual banquet with all of us, all the groups, one big group, and get one very important speaker. We've had at GAWL, we've had Linda Greenhouse from the New York Times, 25 years reporting on the Supreme Court. We've had Navi Pillay, then on the International Criminal Court, got to be UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And I think a good person that we could have would be Stacey Abrams. Get out the vote. How did she do it? What can we do to get it more? Would be good for all of us, I think. So that's one thing, is an annual banquet. And the second thing, doing a project together. This is where my A and B comes in. One is mentor women law students. Bring them into all of this right from the get-go before they get out of school, for all the local law schools. The second thing, take a little bit longer for me to say, and that is build on what I'm so thrilled that GAWL is doing now, and that's working with women in prison. And a project that Kareemah is in charge of is so good with the Women's Transitional Center. Right now, it's hopefully we can get back in gear again, but they didn't have Zoom capability. But that project, you can tell a little bit more about that, Kareemah, in a minute. But I just want to point out, I looked up, there are 3,112 women in prisons in Georgia. That's a lot. And Georgia, by the way, is one of the largest prison systems in the United States. But there are two places that are not real far from here that we could work with if we're interested as a group. One is let's see, about about an hour and a quarter north of Atlanta, and that's Lee Arundel State Prison. And that has 1,824 female offenders. That's a lot of women that need help getting back out into society when they're done without it. The other one is, let's see, and we're at the Metro Transitional Center. Now, that's where GAWL is doing. The other one is Arundel, and Whitworth is in Hartwell. That's about an hour and almost 2 hours away to work there. But they have 442 women at that one. So I'd be happy to look more into that. But we met with the supervisor of the Metro and got the program started there of doing talks with the women on subjects like landlord-tenant law, the law that's going to affect them when they get out. So that I'd love to see us all get involved in that, those who in each of the organizations would be interested in women in prison.
Thank you, Judge Beasley. And I can follow up with an email to the attendees with more information on that.
Good. And I can give you some more of these facts too.
Yes. And I'll turn it over to Judge Cope. The same question.
Yes, I definitely believe that there's strength in numbers. Justice Sears had mentioned that we've got to find common ground. And one of the projects that GAWL had worked with GAWL last board year was on maternal mortality. And that's something that affects all of us. Georgia has one of the highest rates generally for the maternal mortality in the nation. And the rate for African-American women is even higher. And so this is something we worked with some of the members of the state legislature last year to put on a program to shed some light on this issue, because I was just amazed at how many people were not aware of how high Georgia's maternal mortality rate is. And that's not getting any better. And so using our platform for things like that, that affect all of us, is one place that we can use our platforms to work together. And also, in terms of finding other common ground, we talk a lot about, politics and that kind of thing, but the thing that I like about GAWL, about GAWL, about the Georgia Hispanic Bar Association, about GAPABA, about all of these organizations, we are very diverse, right? And so there are efforts, community efforts that we can get together and we can utilize our resources in terms of even helping AVLF with their Saturday program. We said, one Saturday a month or one Saturday every 6 months, that we would join forces and help AVLF. I know we do it individually, but that's a project that we could work on together. And also, one of the things that I've pushed during the pandemic is utilizing the platform that we're on right now to teach our younger lawyers, to provide practical training, even for our more seasoned lawyers. I mean, we have on this panel one of the best appellate lawyers in the nation, in Justice Sears. We have, you, Kareemah, you're in government affairs. I mean, we have the resources to be able to provide programming while we're all stuck in the house anyway. Most of us are in the courtroom or in the office, to be able to put on that programming. One thing I admire about GAWL is in January, we know what that program is going to be for the entire year. And being able to share that programming, among all of the organizations, we can all benefit from these organizations, joining each of our organizations. I have not joined the Gwinnett Hispanic Bar Association yet, but I'm coming. But that's one thing that I try to do is I try to support each of the organizations, because each of the organizations has so much to offer. Even if you're not a part of the identity that organization was created for or by. There's so much that these organizations offer in terms of training, in terms of professional development. And I'd like to see us support each other in that way. Like I said, even just joining the organizations.
All great points. Thank you, Judge Cope. And same question, Attorney Youn.
Yes, well, I really love this idea of a justice league of power women getting together like super heroines to fight for truth and justice. I love the idea of this, massive event, but we also know that, it's the smaller spaces where work really gets done too. So there's having events together, just breaking bread like with GHBA, a happy hour, because collaboration really just starts with getting to know each other socially. I firmly believe that. And then beyond that, once we create larger events or larger spaces where we can come together, and it's not just internal, it's external. The branding to see really powerful women of so many diverse backgrounds in the legal profession coming together really does have an impact on the larger population. I firmly believe that. I also think that I've learned a tremendous amount during the pandemic about technology, and things that I've been able to do on Zoom, I have never been able to do before. I mean, just learning how to do these PowerPoints and slide sharing things. And when we start coming back to having in-person events, I know that's going to be its own process with people psychologically figuring out, is it safe to come back out? But then maybe having hybrid things of where you can utilize these virtual platforms to do events like this. Because for me, first of all, when I was invited to this panel, I was like, how am I on this panel? It's like complete imposter syndrome. How am I on this panel? But now that I am, and being able to know that I can reach out to all of you, and we have this shared commonality of experience here, that to me is probably my greatest takeaway from this, and hopefully for all the attendees as well.
Agreed, Bonnie. And one of the things that we thought about in creating this event was the future lawyers, the baby girls that are looking up to us. I have an 11-year-old, and she is a de facto GAWL member because I've been in GAWL practically all of her life. But they're watching, and what can we say we did for their generation to help them in some way, not go through the obstacles that we went through. And I'm going to turn it over, segue to Attorney Olmos and ask the same question.
Yes, I'm a strong believer in, being in numbers, raising our voice in numbers. Um, just because we learned, having been through the whole language access campaign, I remember when I started practicing, I was told that the Supreme Court's rule on the use of interpreters was aspirational. And it wasn't until we started convening, I reached out to Georgia Legal Services. We got together. Some of the public service lawyers with private bar, they were impressed that some of the private attorneys were interested in this issue. I was like, of course we're interested. We're privately retained, but those interpreters make make more money than we do. I mean, because and having come from Texas, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm scratching my head going, why is it that they're interpreters in the courthouse in Texas and they're not here? Title VI doesn't apply in Georgia? What's going on? So when we got together and we had the support of we had Chief Judge Adams from DeKalb, and at the time we had Chief Judge Wright, who were big supporters of ours. And we were just a group of attorneys who met and started talking about the issue and created the CLE. It's called Eliminating Barriers to Justice. And of that, we realized, wait a minute, we got to have some teeth here. We can't just moan and groan about it. We got to do something about it. So we had some members that were on the commission. And so with somebody touched on allies earlier, we had some allies on the commission on interpreters. And we said, hey, we need some teeth. What can we do? And so we had some folks on the commission start working on the Superior Court rule. Now we have Superior Court Rule 7.3. But we shouldn't have had to go that far. We already had a Supreme Court rule. And then we had Title VI, we had federal law. But until we came out in numbers and used our allies or worked with our allies, we didn't make a change. And so, yes, just that one experience you can make it, and it can be a small group. But when that small group gets together and they start, making their voice heard and reaching out to their allies, then that's when we start to see things happen. And it's a different day. We even have interpreters at mediation now. So they've realized, when I say the counties have realized how important it is when they're dealing with people of immigrant communities, to have them understand what's going on, especially when there's a decision being made over children and assets. But the big one is children, which brings me to my next pet project, which I'm telling you, I don't ask for these projects. They just end up on my desk. So the next project that I have is the reunification of United States citizen children with their immigrant parents, because we see so much bias when it comes to the separation of children and parent. And, what I've been seeing is the mentality of, well, if they're US citizen children, then they stay here, regardless of where the parent goes. And you've not even talked to the parents. So there's no investigation, which brings me to Bonnie. You may be getting a call because we were having our inclusion committee meeting last week with the family law section. And Judge Davis was mentioning about how the Asian community is growing in Gwinnett County. And he wanted to know about cultural competence, or should there be guardians who can identify of the same culture and heritage? And I said, at the very least, cultural competency needs to be part of the training to be a guardian ad litem. I mean, I don't know that we have enough of us out there to identify with all, like in my case, I don't know that I could be a guardian and with the amount of cases that are out there. But if we have people who are culturally competent to handle those cases, it may cut down on the separation of the children and the bias that we see between an immigrant parent and a non-immigrant parent. So that's real important. And I opened my mouth and I said, I see an opportunity to work with CAPABA and maybe GHBA to put on a training. So I'm all in favor for trainings, because I feel like if you educate and you give them a chance to make a change, you're giving them the opportunity. If they don't change and they've been given the opportunity, then that's when you can go to the courthouse and file your lawsuits. But I have found, just from my experience with the language access, that the judges are open to hearing about it, or at the very least, they'll ask you, can you brief me on this issue? I don't know enough about it. And so that's your opportunity to speak up. And if we have more people educated on the issue to speak up, that's another way we speak up in numbers. So education is power.
Thank you, Attorney Olmos. And it is a aspirational goal of mine for this Path to Empowerment series to be another means for publication of these issues like these. I know that we're all different. I believe it was Justice Sears that highlighted that even within the African American community, we have a spectrum of conservative to liberal. We're all different, but there are issues that I care about in the Asian community.
Oh, no.
I think her the technology bug might have gotten her as well. So
Gave it to Kareemah, Veronica.
Maybe if she
Okay.
stops and then starts again.
so okay, so we will just pick up from here. And I think what we want to do now for the sake of time is we do have at least one question. We wanted to leave time for question and answer. And so what we'll do is there was a question that was asked by an anonymous member or attendee here tonight. And the question was, if you were a first-year associate under the same circumstances we are going through right now, how would you network with your supervisors in order to get effective training and, most importantly, billable projects? And she's back. Is there any one that would like to answer this question for us?
Could you repeat that? I guess the question was, how do you get good projects if you're an associate at a law firm?
Yes, particularly during the pandemic. And I think, I'm not exactly sure of the underpinnings of the question, but that is the basis of the question. How would you get effective training?
Yeah, it's hard, I think, during this time. And it depends, of course, on how long the associate's been in the law firm. If they've been there 1 or 2 years, it's going to be harder. If they've been there 4 or 5 years, then they're pretty much already established, and it shouldn't be that hard. Honestly, and people may not like this, but I'll just say it. I think you've got, and this is what I'm finding in my own law firm, I don't think this kind of thing works, or telephone calls where you just, between partner and associate, where you get an assignment and you just do the assignment. I think getting to be a good lawyer requires some learning by osmosis. You have to be there, see it, feel it, do it, be around, that kind of thing. Also, if you're in a law firm, there's a politics to it all. And I think I've seen in my firm, the associates that I feel are being the most successful, those who find a way to get into the office from time to time and socially distance or what, be safe, because I go in 3 or 4 times a week, but I'm noticing at my firm, for example, and at other firms, I go in, junior partners go in, younger partners go in, but the associates never go in. Some of them do. Some of them do, and I think that they found a very success. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be more successful. But those that I haven't seen since March, I think it's going to be a problem. Now, I could say it won't be, because that's what you're supposed to say, pandemic and all that kind of stuff. But I really think it's going to be easier if you could figure out a way, because no one's there, most people aren't there to wear a mask or two and a face shield. I have masks, all kinds of masks, KN95s, 95, flip face shields, colorful ones, and my AKA mask, all kinds. I wear sometimes two or three of them, but just to be seen and walking around like you care, I think is going to matter a lot more than just waiting at home to have some partner call with an assignment. I think that's a loser, personally.
Absolutely agree.
Okay.
I'm gonna turn it back over to our host.
Thank you. I apologize. The internet got me now. And I don't know what happened, but I logged back in very easily. But we are at the point in time where we will now take questions for our panelists. You can either type them into the chat. There is a Q&A function there, or you can raise your hand. But if you type them into the chat, it might be a lot quicker to get them to you. Yes, someone typed in COVID internet. Okay. That is the perfect way to describe my internet connection.
Can I add something to what Justice Sears said about going in?
Please.
I don't do the big firm. I couldn't tell you what the big firm is like. But I have found over the years that I have had to take classes and seminars on it's just telling you how old I am, that I I had a big birthday this year, but I was beginning to not understand the younger generations coming up because they have a different mentality altogether. But one of the things that I admire in the younger attorneys, and it's kind of piggybacking on what Judge Sears says, is when that attorney comes in and says, I don't know this issue, I've researched it, this is what I'm thinking, that's a very different approach. And you probably will catch your supervising attorney's attention if you come in with some initiative.
Yeah.
If you come in here and you just say, and you don't know how many I've had apply for jobs, and they say, I want this big salary and I want to be partner in less than a year, or partner track in less than a year. And I'm looking at him like, okay, how many cases have you tried? What's your book of business? What are you bringing to the table? Because the supervising attorneys are so busy most of the time that if you can help take something off their back, you're going to get their attention.
Right.
And so my advice to the younger attorneys who want to get those billable times, offer, or don't just go in and ask or demand. In some of the cases, I say demand because some people I want this and this and this and this. And I just chalked it up to that's a generational thing. And that can be fine to be direct, but understand that if you're being direct, that's great. But watch your approach and offer something back. This is what I've done for you, or this is what I've done for you. Take that initiative. And that's my best piece of advice. And I guarantee you probably will be on the radar for some billable time. And if they can trust you, your work is reliable, it's on time, it is accurate, you've done the research. It's okay if it's not perfect. You can ask questions.
Yeah.
What you want is to get that supervising attorney's attention, that they can count on you.
If I would add this, I love that they can count on you for something.
Right.
You don't have to have 40 years of experience like I have, but I just want a young person who will sit with me, and because I'm used to working with law clerks, talk to me, let's work it through. You think this, I think this, I think this, I think this. Let's try to mold something that makes sense. But you were quite right. I just call me tell me what you need. I want you to tell me what you think I need. something. Uh, and many young people can do that. A lot of young people can do that. But
You have to
many,
volunteer. Yeah.
yeah.
And if you see something, say something. It's that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, but many just don't. Uh, and they're going to be the less successful lawyers.
Not everybody will have a supervisor that they connect with well socially. And sometimes you're going to have to find a champion within your firm that's not within your department, or even outside of your firm, right? Who's
Right.
going to maybe know your partner a little bit better. And once you establish that rapport of volunteering or going above and beyond, um, that will distinguish yourself. And I will say that volunteering within bar associations matters, because I can tell you that within GAPABA, of the young law students I've mentored or young associates I've mentored, I have specifically reached out to law firms after they've interviewed and said, this person, I can't tell you if they've, had the most outstanding academics, but they were there 15, 20 minutes early before the event started. They made sure they were accompanying me, and asking me if I needed anything unobtrusively, and they were the most helpful.
Mm.
Those characteristics can mean a lot. And coming from, a trusted friend or partner who notices that at an event, that can mean a lot.
And one of the other things, if I can just add, I went to the American Bar Association Women Rainmakers, and they actually have coaches. And one of the things that, that I took away from that or those conferences, because I then became a member and paid for my own coach. I'm in private practice, have my own practice, but I still had my own coach. And one of the things that I realized, that if you're in a big firm, and just because this is one of the things my coach has shared with me, if you're in a big firm and they haven't provided you with a coach, because that's kind of like a perk, you need to start really paying attention to that. Because what those people are learning, the ones who have the coaches, are how to bring in business, how to network. And if that's the case, they're probably looking at moving them to partner. And if you've been there longer than the ones that get her coaches, you might want to start paying really close attention. Maybe hire your own coach, and so that you can be competitive.
Great advice. Thank you. We're gonna wrap it up with one more question, and please, you all can make it as brief as you would like. And I'm going to ask if there are considering where we are as women lawyers today, and how far we've come. Are there things that you feel that women lawyers are doing right now? Or are there areas that you think we can further develop in our path to social and political engagement in Georgia? I know that may be a lot. So if I need to repeat it, um, the essence of the question is, are there areas where you feel like women lawyers have developed sufficiently? Are there areas that you feel like we need a little bit more development or progress, if you will? And I'll start with whoever wants to go for it. Okay, I'll start with Justice Sears.
Well, we're not, I don't mean to be negative, but let me just tell you what I think where we're not making it so good. In firms like where I am, we're not in big law, and we're not equity partners in big firms. We're not making the top money. We've managed to get now into public service, which I think is good. But not enough women. So we've got to hit the big firms, in bigger numbers, in representative numbers. And there are also sort of I call them sort of female ghettos in those areas, employment law, civil rights law. You know, there are certain areas, not securities, not finance, not this. We need to be in everything. There's nothing wrong with being an employment lawyer, but I hate to see everybody moving into certain, you know, sections kind of type thing. Women want, too many women wait to be appointed to public office. They don't want to take the risk and run for public office. Lawyers are risk averse as it is, but women lawyers are extremely risk averse. To get out there and run, well, you know, Judge, it's if I could say hellified, it's on fire. It's very different than waiting around to get an appointment to public office. So I'd like, and that's all of them. You know, that's from judge to, you know, to the highest offices. And I would like to see us in the highest offices that we could possibly get. So that's, but there are some things we're doing right, but just not enough. I really want us to get better. I would have thought that I've been a member of the bar now over 40 years. And I would have thought that we would have made more progress since I started in 1980. And Judge Beasley, I guess you were started 10 years before that.
Way back in the last century.
Okay, no, but I'm just saying, I just thought, you know, it would be better than it is right now.
Well, building
Not
on
that it's
that.
not better, but sorry, but just way better. I'm sorry, Judge.
No, I'm sorry. I'm the one
No,
that.
it's fine, it's fine.
Well, building on that though, and what Bernadette said, maybe one of, you know, we have had several times of, I think it was year after year, of sponsoring training to run for office, and it was called Women on the Run. Remember that? And that sort of thing, perhaps we should carry on, because that was very, very useful and it was very practical. And
GAWL has that.
Good.
It's
And
very
we-
effective.
Yeah, every year.
Yes.
Good. And well, then we can all participate in that.
Right.
Well, and what Bernadette says makes me think that maybe one of the things we could sponsor is hire an executive coach, like Robin Hensley or somebody, who gives a series of lectures or one lecture on what Bernadette was just talking about, and open it up to young lawyers specifically, and maybe even law students.
Yeah, I think
And-
Bernadette made some excellent comments.
And to piggyback on that, just to give a shout out to the JPOA, GAWL's Judicial and Public Officers Academy. I've served as a facilitator for 2 years, and I will tell you, many here know that I ran for office unsuccessfully back in 2018 before running successfully unopposed this time in 2020. But I will tell you that I wished I had went through that academy before I ran the first time. Everything, and it's not just for judge. There's training for any elected and appointed offices, getting any elected and appointed offices in the law, particularly for the legislature and judges. But I just want to plug and say the name of that particular program. GAWL has a leadership academy, which does a little bit of that training, but it would be great, as Justice Sears and Judge Beasley have said, to have that training available for anyone. I know it's available for any member of either GAWL or GAWL. I know GAWL opens it to all the membership, not just women. There were men that were members of those classes as well. So we need more of that, Justice Sears, in order to move that needle. As you said, I've been practicing almost 20 years, so less than half of the time you've been practicing. You know, I've seen a lot of progress, but, you know, we're still having firsts in 2020 and 2021.
Right.
And that's problematic. So I'd like to see more progress in the area as well.
Thank you, Judge Cope. Attorney Youn?
Where I've seen some success this year is in women managing to juggle the pandemic and having this work from home situation. I mean, of course, there's successes and then there's spectacular failures, but the ability to voice those frustrations authentically has, for the first time, I think, men being stuck at home while children are trying to study and managing that technology. I think of my friend Winter Wheeler, who has really taken off in terms of building her Zoom brand and being able to just talk about these issues of, she has 4 kids. She put a bouncy house in her living room to try to provide some relief from the kids so that they would entertain themselves. That type of creativity is commendable. But at the same time, technology makes firms realize, hey, there is a lot more to work from home than there has been in the past, which allows for greater flexibility of schedules than in the past. It cannot substitute for the in-person training that you'll get. And I know that that's impacted first-year associates and given law students a ton of anxiety. But at the same time, I find some people a lot more accessible than they were before. So I'm hoping we'll take away some of the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic and use those tools even as we ease back into normal work life for the betterment of women in the legal profession.
Agreed. Thank you, Bonnie. Attorney Olmos?
I'm sorry, I was being summoned over there. What was the question?
Are there areas where you believe women lawyers are prospering? Are there areas where you think we need a little bit more development or progress?
I think we do need progress, especially when it comes to networking, encouraging other attorneys if they're going to go out on their own, helping build that network. Referrals are extremely important for another female, at least in my eyes. If I have a friend that's going, I hear she's opening practice and it was like, hey, do you need office space? I got office space. Give them a break, pay it forward because somebody helped you along the way and you can't forget that. Anything, that person does criminal law. Okay, you do criminal law, here you go. I got a call today. Here, let me refer this to you. Help your fellow woman lawyer, female lawyer out. Help them get up. And it's not just women helping women. When I started, I reached out to just neighboring lawyers and said, hey, I'm the new kid on the block. I'm not competing. I'm just here and I want you to know who I am. And they were like, hey, do you do family? I was like, no, I don't do family, but I guess I'll do it now. And they started bombarding me with family cases. And so it's just one of those things where, help a new lawyer out, help that young lawyer if they're starting on their own, if they're going to run for office, pay it forward. You didn't get to where you are by yourself.
Yes. So true. Well, I cannot thank you all enough for joining us for tonight's inaugural Path to Empowerment series event. This is exactly what we visioned it to be. All of us coming together to address the issues that we face as women lawyers for the purpose of our betterment. So I would like to thank you. I would especially like to thank our president, Judge Cope, for allowing us the liberty of creating this event and for inspiring it. I don't think you know how pivotal you are in so many of the young lawyers' lives that you've been involved in, but you are the essence of empowerment. So that's just rightful for this event to be called the Path to Empowerment. And I hope it can continue, and I hope we can continue the collaboration amongst some more the organizations so that we address these important issues, especially in today's time. So thank you all. I admire you all. And let me see. Veronica, if you don't have any other closing remarks, we all are free to go.
Thank you.
Just to thank you all. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you,
It was
Kareemah.
very good to be with you.
Thank you.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Good to see
Thank
the
you.
strength of this group and these groups. Thanks.
Thank you, Judge Beasley.
Thank you.
Everyone have a great evening.
You too. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I can't hear you.
You guys did it. It was amazing.
Still recording.
Oh, hold on. Let me finish recording. Sorry, before you hear me yelling.
Yeah, 1 second.